Hello and welcome to the Scatterville channel, and today I'm going to bring you guys my review of the NZXT pre-built starter gaming PC. Now, I rarely do pre-built reviews on my channel because, I don't want to do it for the easy views or for the free sensationalism. I only do it if I think it's worth your guys' time for watching, because 9 times out of 10, building a custom gaming PC is going to offer more value, better specifications for a lesser cost, and potentially better resale value with higher quality components in some areas that may be more attractive to buyers down the road. And also, like, in my opinion, just with 60% of pre-builts out there, I think they're overpriced, or they lack on certain components in terms of quality that need to have higher quality, again, for like resale value. Or 3, they use deceptive marketing to sell you their computers. And thankfully, I think the NZXT Starter Gaming PC is none of those things. So in this video, I'm going to be analyzing the specifications and value you're getting behind this $700 pre-built gaming PC, then going into the benchmarks, and then closing out with my final critiques of this pre-built gaming PC and if ultimately you should consider it for $700 of your money. And for my next video, if you like graphics card review videos, you might like the next one coming up. So if you want to see this, you might want to consider subscribing to see this video that I'll be demoing next week. Otherwise, if you don't want to see this, you're totally welcome to continue watching the video and enjoy what I have to present for you guys. So starting with the specifications, this PC is rocking an i3-9100F, a Deepcoat Gamax GTE V2, an MSI Mortar B365 motherboard, a single 8GB 3000 MHz stick of RAM, a 512GB Intel 660p M.2 SSD, an EVGA 450BR 450W 80+ bronze power supply, of course the mid-tower NZXT H510 case, a Wi-Fi card, and all of that is bundled with a 2-year warranty as well as a valid Windows 10 license. So I went ahead and threw this PC into PC Part Picker and approximately got all the prices of, say, building this DIY, so doing it yourself, and it rounded out to about $600. So you're paying a $100 premium to have this PC assembled for you, along with having Windows installed with a valid Windows 10 key. And in my opinion, for $700, I know a lot of you are going to point out that this PC should obviously use the latest Ryzen 3100 and 3300X along with a B450 motherboard, since that is the faster budget solution. However, as of filming this video, which is September 2020, going with that route for Ryzen on the budget end is, for the most part, always out of stock or overpriced. So going with this Intel route with the i3-9100F and a B365 motherboard is actually not too shabby, and that's the exact route that I went down with my $500 custom gaming PC I released last week, because those components are in stock and they're not overpriced, which is going to be great, again, for a budget gaming PC like this. So that i3 choice is actually not too crazy and not as bad as you think. Now, one thing I would have liked to have seen in a $700 gaming PC is a faster graphics card, because I think a GTX 1650, not even the super variant, is a little bit underwhelming for a $700 pre-built, because if you look at the RX 570 and 580 for the same price, those outperform it, again, for the same price. So it's just a little bit awkward to see that kind of slow of a card in this sort of PC. But the frame rates that I got with this PC were actually not too terrible if you set your game settings to the most optimal settings for like high frames. So really, I wouldn't have minded if like this PC were actually $750 and included a GTX 1650 super card. I think that would have been a lot more comfortable, but I do have quarrels with that single 8GB stick of RAM, which we will be talking about later in the video, but that's a red flag for me. Now, thankfully, the power supply in this PC isn't actually that bad for a pre-built system, though it is 450 watts. And again, it's the EVGA 450BR, which is an 80+ bronze power supply. But thankfully, I actually went ahead and threw in an RTX 2060 Super Zotac Amp Edition card, which uses I think it's a 6-pin and an 8-pin connector with that 450 watt power supply. Threw it on Furmark, which is an application that runs your graphics card at 100%, and the system had enough wattage. So you can actually throw in a semi-high-end graphics card into this PC with that 450 watt power supply without needing to upgrade it. But I mean, If you're thinking of upgrading to like this thing in that PC, you're obviously going to need a more powerful power supply. But say if you want to move on to a slightly faster graphics card than that 1650, like the 2060 Super or like a Radeon 5700, I think you'd be okay with that 450 watt power supply, since the CPU in the system can't overclock, which again, I don't think is a bad thing, because overclocking gains in gaming kind of diminish after 4.3 gigahertz, and the i3-9100F can go up to 4.2 gigahertz. And the last thing I want to touch on that I noticed were case thermals, because this is the NZXT H510. The front panel intake is pretty much non-existent. You have that just single strip of ventilation on the back side of the case, and with the fan layout, you have a fan in the front and a fan in the back doing an intake and an exhaust. Now, I went ahead and threw in the 1650, again with Furmark, and the maxed GPU temperature I got was 57 degrees Celsius, which is not bad for a low-end graphics card. But again, I threw in that 2060 Super Amp Edition card, and the max temperature it hit at 100% load with that fan configuration inside the H510 was 70 degrees Celsius max, which is actually a little bit lower than I expected. So not too shabby for an NZXT case. You got let off the hook this one time, NZXT, because I'm not the biggest fan of the thermals inside this PC case, but thankfully I think a lot of that was assisted with that custom aftermarket CPU cooler just pushing out air right outside the case, so any fresh air goes right to the graphics card. So good work on you, NZXT, for doing your thermal performance homework. Good job. So now with all my thoughts concluded on the specifications, value, and like thermals and testing with this PC, let's now go ahead and look at the benchmarks, which are these. Okay, final critiques. What do I have to say about this PC? And like I said, kind of near the beginning of this video, that single 8GB 3000 megahertz stick of RAM is the main bottleneck with this PC. As you guys saw with Fortnite and Battlefield 5, the 1% lows were abnormally low. They were not comfortable for me while I was gaming, because the game, like every 15 to 20 seconds, would just jump down in frames all the way to like 12 or 10 all of a sudden, and it just left kind of like a sour taste in my mouth, and I knew that was because of the RAM. And to prove that was the issue, I went ahead and actually threw in another single, actually this wasn't in addition to it, but I just threw in a single 16GB stick of 24 megahertz cast latency 17 RAM that's not even the highest quality or the best there is, but the 1% lows and the overall frames per second on all the games that I tested went up, especially in Fortnite and Battlefield 5. Those gaming experiences on 16 gigabytes of RAM were much more playable versus that single 8GB stick. So in my personal opinion, if you are going to get this PC, just go ahead and get another 8GB 3000 megahertz DDR4 stick of RAM to make this PC a dual channel 16GB kit PC, because that's going to leave you with a much better gaming experience with much higher 1% lows, so your game doesn't randomly drop to like 12 frames per second all of a sudden every like 20 to 30 seconds, which will cost you about another like 50 bucks. So really you're spending $750 if you want to go with my route with the starter gaming PC. But again, as you just saw, a single 8GB stick of RAM is still sort of adequate for games like Apex Legends, Rainbow Six Siege, and even Valorant, where that extra memory didn't really benefit the 1% lows or overall frame rate that much. So you can still game with that single 8GB stick of RAM, but I think you'll just have a much better peace of mind if you have 2 8GB sticks of RAM rather than just 1. Otherwise though, that's my only real main issue with this gaming PC. It handled the temperatures well, the power supply is better than you think for a $700 pre-built gaming PC, and the overall performance, even in games that didn't stutter a whole bunch, were actually kind of decent. Like Valorant was a pretty high frames per second, Apex Legends was solid, and Rainbow Six Siege again exceeded my expectations, getting really high frames per second for a $700 gaming PC at high settings. So besides that single 1 8GB stick of RAM that does hold back this system in a few select games, I think this is an okay deal for a $700 pre-built gaming PC. And remember, you're backed up by NZXT's 2-year warranty, and you've seen how supportive they are on social media for other people when it comes to their gaming PCs, so I would be comfortable in trusting them with your money for a pre-built gaming PC. Anyways, if you're interested in the system, I'll go ahead and leave a link for it in the description below. And with all that said, thank you for watching, and if you want to become more involved with the Scattervault community, I've got a Discord, Twitter, Instagram, what's the next one? TikTok, that's right, and then finishing out with my Twitch channel. I think that's all of them. And again, if you like this video, you might want to consider subscribing because I'm going to be putting out more videos for the upcoming month, because again, I have a 3080 review on the way, as well as other really cool content coming up, sometimes featuring those new RTX 3000 series cards. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and this is the Scattervault channel, signing out.